Hello, everyone. My name is Chet Monday, and I'm a youth advisor for EarthX and March for Science. And I'm joined by Heeta Lakhani, who is the formal global South focal point for YOUNGO. How's it going, Heeta?
Hi, Chet. Hi, everybody. Lovely to meet you again, Chet.
Good to see you. Always great to talk to you. We do have some pretty big announcements today, so please hang around until the end of the stream. We're going to tell you all about something we are planning for a little bit later in the next month. But to kick things off, so as the global focal point of YOUNGO, what was your job, Hita, and what were your goals with the organization and how you interacted with the UNFCCC, which is the UN's framework on climate change?
Yeah, I think so. As focal point for last year at COP26, we basically worked. Of course, our primary area of focus was COP26, but we worked along with the UNFCCC, but which is the UN climate change body, and also other UN bodies to see how young people can be meaningfully engaged, how they can be empowered to be a part of this intergovernmental climate change process. So there were a series of engagements that we did. Of course, it being a 2-year mandate because of the pandemic, we had additional time where there were no in-person meetings. So there was a lot of time to build these relationships, to create these channels of engagement, to make sure that Yango and youth voices are well known and are aware of the so that the UN is aware of Yango, but also the youth are aware of the different modes of engagement of how they can truly be meaningful within the really complicated space of the international intergovernmental negotiations. So we did focus while on COP26. The overall focus, of course, was really pushing countries to be more ambitious to meet the 1.5-degree target. And then within that, younger working groups had different concrete areas of focus based on the negotiations and based on the running topics that were going on in the lead up to and at COP26.
Of course. And so for those watching, obviously COP is the Conference of Parties, which happens every year. And it seems almost laughable that we've had this many of them, but it can be really intimidating for young people to enter the space. And I think your work and Youngo's work is so critical in when young people of all different backgrounds enter a room, mainly made up of powerful, critical figures in governments that aren't always open to listening to young people. So creating a framework for them to enter this space is really, really powerful. So obviously amazing work with COP26. And once again, we're looking towards COP27 this fall or in November. So what are some specific issues pertaining to young people that you think need to be emphasized heading into COP27?
I think there are a whole different kinds of things that we need to look at. Um, and issues not necessarily for young people, but issues that young people care deeply about. Like, for example, how are we really going to get to the 1.5-degree goal? We're talking about it for a while now, especially since the 2018 special report that came out on the IPCC 1.5-degree report. But I mean, even then, since all the conversations, since the different conference of parties or the COPs or the negotiations that have happened leading up until COP26 last year, um, there is still a gap between the commitments, between the actions that countries are currently taking, between the commitments that they've made and the 1.5-degree goal. So even the current aggregate of commitments does not get us close to the 1.5-degree goal. So I think different ways on how we can really sort of champion that, push that, whether it is just ensuring that finance is used meaningfully, there is the inflow of finance, countries that committed to the $100 billion goal, which was supposed to have been completed, achieved by 2020, but we're nowhere close to it even today. To make sure that finance is going to developing countries that need the finance for technology, for adaptation, leading on to different modes of how do you really look at carbon markets, what is the pricing, and then there are different agendas under the climate change negotiations. But really, the big picture is getting countries to be more ambitious, push them to try and achieve the 1.5-degree goal, because whether we like it or not, that difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 or whatever 2.5 or 3 degrees that we're close to is really the little difference between life and death for generations to come, to see whether they're going to live on a planet in peace and harmony, or they're going to live on a planet which is, with climate issues, with conflict, as they grow up. So I think this is a very crucial push that we really need to continue doing in order to really bridge this gap.
Absolutely. And obviously, reaching or not reaching 1.5 is that main goal, keeping as low as possible on global emissions. And there are means to that goal, like finance. And so, I've heard a lot about heading into COP27, the importance of finance and the freshly in its second year of COP, the loss and damages. So I'd love to hear, these are also areas where as youth leaders, we can protest often is what we're expected to do, but actually finding a way to sit at the table in these negotiations. Youngo has that seat at the table. So could you talk a little bit about the access to the UNFCCC that Youngo has that is so special, and how that can be used to influence things like finance or loss and damages?
So YOUNGO is the official observer constituency of the UNFCCC. So it is the official constituency for children and young people to be a part of this intergovernmental process. However, it still comes under this observer category. So yes, we do have seats at the table in terms of when there are opening and closing plenaries, which are basically the big events or any other sort of big events that are happening. There are also seats specifically for observer constituencies. YOUNGO is one amongst 9. It is the constituency for children and young people. So there are specific seats allocated for YOUNGO members, whether it is the smaller meetings, for example, there are constituted bodies, again, pretty technical under the UN, but it is basically bodies focusing on different actions, like, for example, one on adaptation, there could be one on there's a standing committee on finance, there's a one on technology, so on and so forth. So YOUNGO has seats and speaking access at those sort of meetings. And we also have, due to the nature of how the constituency is, we have working groups that are following the various negotiating items and really keep a track on what's happening. So there are members in the rooms when the negotiations are taking place. However, there is a little bit of a difference because we're an observer constituency. So unless we're authorized to speak in a negotiation space, it's only for countries unless the floor is really opened up for observers. So while we're in the room, we don't really have the mic to speak within the closed negotiations. We have the mic to speak when it comes to these bodies, when it comes to these meetings and the plenaries, like I mentioned. But despite all of this, the decision-making mandate within the UN climate change, or within most UN bodies, it's an intergovernmental process. So only governments can make decisions. So every draft text that we get out of the COP, for example, the Paris Agreement, all of that, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes in by observers, which is extremely valuable because that is what really pushes governments to do more. But the final decisions are taken by the governments themselves. So YOUNGO has been doing immense amount of work in terms of lobbying, in terms of really following the negotiations, in terms of seeing where the gaps are, talking to negotiators between corridors, finding them at lunch. Basically anything that you can do to really get those points across, to really get the youth demands across, finding champion countries for certain topics, for example. But it's finally the governments or these countries that really need to take our demands into consideration and really negotiate and push for them. So there's a little bit of a gap in the process, but yes, where YOUNGO does have a seat within these rooms and can participate in its capacity.
And I think it's a great thing that can definitely be utilized, but there is that gap, and I am sure all of us young people will continue to push and try to close the gap, whether it's with YOUNGO and the power it already has, or coming through from member states, as youth negotiators with a member state when they start opening up space for that. And of course, there have to be youth leaders to be able to fill those seats, those who are trained in negotiations, who know the demands and know how to work the process of the UNFCCC. So that's why we'd like to make this announcement for the 5th anniversary of March for Science over Earth Day weekend. We're going to be hosting EarthX 2022, and there will be the EarthX 2022 Global Youth Summit, right in Dallas, Texas. That's right. And we're going to be really diving into these issues with youth from around the world, from those local to Dallas and Texas, talking more about this process and how we can get involved, how you can get on a track to become one of those negotiators that will have that young person's voice at the actual table, being able to speak into negotiations and be a part of the decision-making process. So we hope to see you all there, and we'll be sending out some more info very soon. So keep in touch, keep following, and Heeta and I will be there in person. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you again for joining me today, Heeta.
Thank you so much, Chet. I'm really looking forward to the event very, very soon, and looking forward to seeing a lot of you there as well.
Me too. All right. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.